Okay. I'll be starting in 3, 2. To look here, what this debate specifically is about, this debate is about Newcastle football. That's not said in the info slide, but that's what the debate is about. That's what we're going to be debating about. All of our analysis will apply generally. We, however, do think the context is important. What is the context? We're talking about the team with a glorious past. Alan Shearer destroying teams in the Champions League 10 years ago. Currently, they're in a debt crisis. They're facing relegation from the Premier League every year. They're in a crisis of results, which means that their best players are going away. They cannot bring in transfers. Their results are suffering and are unlikely to improve very soon. We said this takeover will offer things obvious like higher transfer budgets, having a better class coach, improving your facilities, the obvious things. We're going to go through the interest of an average fan, explain why this is a good thing for them, a lot of preemptive will be integrated in that. First of all, the average football fan simply loves the sport. Most of us were first taken to a stadium when we were 4 years old. We were amazed by the stands and the players. And we already kind of subconsciously connected that to the idea of happiness. When the club wins, that's the day when you can stay up longer because dad is happy. That's the day when the streets are singing. It's something that's very special to you because the city is celebrating. But also, over time, you develop an identification with the club because it represents more than sport. There's things like local patriotism. This team represents my town in the name of Zagreb is seen like on a flag in the Champions League. Sometimes teams are working class teams, so you identify with them based on class or because they represent a certain religion, like for example, Protestants and Catholics in Scotland, we're talking Glasgow and Celtic. This means people have very strong emotions connected to this. They pay insane amounts of money, even on low paychecks, to buy season tickets, to go to away games on a rainy night in Stoke. They literally cry when their team loses. We've seen Liverpool fans expose themselves to the COVID pandemic, going on the street, celebrating their title. This was so important to them. This means as rational as it is, this is something that literally defines how you feel in your week, in your month. As a sad working class person, we seem to think that's very important. So as a fan, you largely want success. Success, in general, translates to results. Currently, as a Newcastle fan, you remember the glory days. You heard stories your dad told you when you qualified for the Champions League, when you beat teams over there. You cannot see that. You go and stand on the rainy stands. You can see 5 or 6 goals. You simply cannot feel the connection. You cannot feel the happiness. There's only so many losses you can take before being drunk. We say that what this takeover allows you to do is simply achieve more results. Players. We can get not necessarily a world-class coach, but a good quality coach with European experience. We can improve training facilities. A good example of this is Leicester. Like they're not fucking Manchester City, but the Thailand takeover has managed to not only save them from relegation, but buy them several solid players like Vardy, like Mahrez, who have won the Premiership. And although they're not winning the Premiership now, they're still 4th or 5th. And this means that people in the stands get to enjoy something. They see goals being scored. They see their players getting awards. They see Champions League football, hear the Champions League anthem. We see on a very emotional level, and I know you understand that, Noah, that's a very important thing. Football fans, what is the comparative? The comparative is not just losing games and being relegated, which is bad and sad in and of itself, but it's one, you lose players. You cannot keep hold of your best talents and your best players, not just because they want to leave because the club is shit, but also because the club needs the money. You need the transfer money in order to fix the holes in the budget. This means over a long time, you cannot create a congealed team. You cannot have a long-term captain. You cannot have a back four that gels well together and has team chemistry because players, especially young talents, leave after 1 or 2 years. This also very often means you do not have a lot of homegrown players which people connect to. But secondly, this means you lose sponsors. Your primary source of money is stripped away from you, which means over time, you're less capable to attract quality to the club. You're also unlikely to access UEFA funds because you don't play European competitions. But the worst part of this is if you cannot access sponsors, if you cannot access good players because all of them leave and they cannot build up value because they leave very young, because they invent a future elsewhere. This means that over time, the financial difficulties build up. And note that very often successful clubs can go bankrupt. Like, for example, Portsmouth, who went bankrupt and went from the Premier League to the 4th division. This essentially means that the takeover can save a team from literally going defunct in 2 or 3 years, all of those years of history going down the drain. We think that's horrible. There are a number of things an opposition may say to this. First of all, oh, but you don't have real sentiment when it's Saudi Arabian money. It's not homegrown. First of all, I like fucking Manchester City. Newcastle has glory days, right? They remember Alan Shearer. They remember the decades of the past. This way, Manchester United fans had no problem spurging 120 million on Paul Pogba, and Liverpool fans had no problems with the Glazer takeover because they do not see this as a club being manufactured. They simply say it is because of our prestige that this money is coming, and we deserve this kind of investment. But even if this is Manchester City, those fans over time are going to build a culture because a future generation is going to be born in a world where they know that Manchester City is the most powerful club in Manchester and will form a connection. Secondly, there is a pre-existing fan base. St. James Park is always packed, even if they're playing a relegation match. So the atmosphere exists. You can connect with the lads and go down to the pub because you don't have empty stands and an empty stadium. So we say, therefore, that the sentiment towards the club also exists. Also because the other reasons I mentioned before, the other reasons why you connect to the club, it's far more than the players. But then opposition may say, but you may be told that you're a plastic club now. One, we don't care. Manchester City fans don't care what Manchester United fans say. But secondly, you're always going to get insulted. If you're from Liverpool, you're a filthy scoozer, right? That's how the way rivalry works. It's probably uncomparative. But then Op might say, but you will be less able to connect to the players because you're brought in by money. First of all, players representing your club makes us go over many cognitive biases. Racist fans of Dinamo Zagreb chant the name of Kevin Tofil-Katrin because he's the best center back that we've had in years. Why? Because of the cognitive dissonance feeling. You love when your club scores a goal. If this person, even if you have biases towards him, makes me happy, this happiness subconsciously makes me connect to the player. Before I move on, closing opposition very quickly. Yes, go.
A good chunk of opening government's benefits is derived on the premise that fans want victories. Given the info site suggests that we haven't been winning for quite some time, why haven't these fans already left us, and why are they a meaningful part of this debate then?
Look, it's a question of loyalty. Dinamo Zagreb hasn't played like European competitions in spring for 40 years. I still love Dinamo Zagreb. I still got drunk the fuck out of happiness when they like broke in the Europa League. Like, that's not compared. First, in terms of connecting to players, like players make symbolic gestures, like they kiss the crest on the kit and so on and so forth. These things may connect to players. But also say there are other things fans care about. First of all, when the club doesn't have money, it compensates out of your pocket. This means price your tickets, price your season tickets, price your merchandise. They may even sell the name of the stadium to like a company, like Arsenal sold Highbury to build the Emirates Stadium, which never had that kind of connection with the fans. You as a fan spend more money and your history gets traded away to sponsors because the club doesn't have money. The takeover saves you from that. But lastly, in terms of youth development, we're more likely to be able to build up a youth academy with good facilities. Today, youth players don't have the coaches to develop, but even if they do, they have no incentive to stay because they get more wages on an Arsenal youth contract. Now we provide them with better conditions. And this plays with the sentiment of the fans that we have homegrown boys being the captains of our club, like Trent Alexander-Arnold in Liverpool. And we have an incentive to do it as a club. Because if you're told you're a plastic club, you want to show you can develop homegrown players. Like, for example, Phil Foden in Manchester City. There's an incentive to do that. For all of those reasons, we say that open government wins the debate.
Okay, we thank the Prime Minister, and we're happy to call upon the Leader of Opposition. Here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What you need to recognize in this debate is the Saudi Arabian investment of fund is not that benevolent as opening government wants to suggest. These people have meaning and reason why these people want to invest in the first place. We think that this Saudi Arabian investment fund is only doing this in order to maximize the short-term benefits that they can gain, but also in order to watch out all the illegal action or terrible actions that they are doing within sports field. So, for example, killing the people who wrote the article against them, or for example, selling like illegal broadcast TV or programs, for example. They are using this funding as a tool to wash out these kind of things. We think that is a terrible thing that we should oppose. Two arguments, therefore. Firstly, why private investment undermines what the fund really wants. Second, why even if the strength of the team is something important, why this is only going to be short-term development, which doesn't lead to the long-term sustainability of the club. Also, but before that, one clarification. Firstly, I think this debate is not about like this a club going bankrupt. This club could get alternative funding from other kind of club. This debate is about like the extent of the money that these people want to receive. But second, we support things like more sustainable development. For example, investing on things like training or things like prospect players, rather than selling these prospect or young rookie players. We want to develop these players as it is and stick to the identity of the club and the unique style that this club holds and the history it holds. Firstly, what is the meaning of sports? We think the value of sports is not only about winning, but it is about personal dream and belonging and cheering for your team. Being the one, it's like religion, having this unique community, having this unique style, and having this team, having this venues that you go every week. It is a unique community that these people hold. Second thing, it's what these people want. It's not only win, but win in their unique way by the current team players that they have, by developing the current teamwork that they have, and the player who have been there since you are a child, or the player who you develop, who you know since the rookie. And these are the type of sense of locality and the team identity that they want to bring, and they have the unique skill set and unique play style that each team has. We think that that's the sort of thing that these fans wants in the first place. But secondly, we think that even if these fans are able to win in the short term, what these people want is overcoming this dark age and the struggle time. The fact that they were able to overcome is a part of important identity and the club history for these people. We think the top priority of this debate is not only about winning, but the fact that you are able to build your own club identity and further expand the persuasion toward this kind of team. Why this like proposal is likely to undermine this, and why it is likely to be against the fan, against the interest of the fan. First premise to understand is you are likely to lose agency and control over this club, because these funding have huge money, which means that they are able to have control over what kind of policy, what kind of strategy that these sports clubs are likely to do. Second thing to note, it is likely to be politicized. Firstly, because it is a Saudi Arabian state, which means that there's likely to be a backlash, and when they are likely to be criticized for accepting money from like human rights organization which is violating human rights. We think that this club is likely to be criticized from the public, and there's likely to be internal conflict within the club, which means that it is likely to hinder the ability for these people to build their own club identity and their local identity. But second, we think that it also decapitates the player's ability to talk about political opinion. For example, when in NBA, when one player tries to go against Hong Kong government, the NBA forced them to silent themselves, and we think these kind of players are likely to be suppressed, and they are likely to not be able to say no, because they are the ones who are employed by this Saudi Arabian fund. They cannot say no to these players, and we think it is likely to break the atmosphere or the important identity of these clubs. But third of all, they are likely to be tolerant to human rights violation. We see, and for example, more number of women being able to access the sports, which was not possible 10 years ago. But this is likely to be regressive within their side, when women are likely to be denied to watch sports. Given that this is a Saudi Arabian state, we think that they are likely to exclude these players, and we think this kind of sense of inclusiveness and the unique atmosphere is likely to be lost within their side of the house. But last harm is that this funding is likely to be utilized as a tool to wash out the sort of mistakes and the terrible things that these funding are doing. For example, Saudi Arabia killed one of the people who are writing sports article. Well, for example, they are doing illegal action in terms of broadcasting rights and selling illegally letting different kind of videos of different professional league watch. And we think these are likely to be this is likely to be worse within outside of the house. Within their side of the house. Firstly, because it allows this funding to use this as a justification to wash out and to pretend they are the good guy and to pretend that they care about sports. But second, it gives authority to the sports club. As the info slide said, they have disproportionate amount of money, which means that other soccer clubs in the same league, or the committee of the league, it is difficult for these people to criticize this club and say no, because they have huge control over the money and the popularity of the club. As a result, the ability for them to criticize these kind of terrible action is likely to be undermined within their side. Why is this important? Firstly, we think that, as I told you, fans care about love and club identity and the sense of community as a club. I think this unique spiritual meaning that this sport has is likely to be undermined when all of these terrible things are likely to happen within Saudi Arabian state. But second, this is a more likely scenario compared to opening government, because the reason why these people fund is not to be nice, but they care about getting some sort of benefit from it. We think that this Saudi Arabian state is likely to use it in a selfish way, and we think that's a likely scenario. Second argument, in terms of development, we think this is likely to be short-term, given the Arab funding cares about maximizing the money that they can gain from this speculative investment. What is the consequence of this? Firstly, they are likely to sell the prospect players or rookie players who have the future, but who may not be good right now, but who are likely to develop in the future. But second, they are likely to change the strategy and the unique club play style that they have. They are likely to undermine the club history, because all they care about is winning, and all they care about is winning in the short term. We think, at least in our side, firstly, we are able to stick to our own style. But second, we have drafting system to acquire players, even if we are in the lower class. We think drafting system allows you to compensate and fill in the gap so that you can gain good prospect players. In our side, we are able to have local ties and more sustainable form of development. And we think this is fundamentally what this fund wants. Very proud support. Thank you.
We thank Leader of Opposition. We're happy to call upon Deputy Prime Minister. Here, here. Woo!
Sorry about that. Am I audible? Yeah, give me a second. Also might as well. Yeah. All right.
Youth development.
I'll start in 3, 2, 1. I'm unfortunately going to be very honest here. I think when Olja says overcoming this very hard struggle strengthens the identity, not only is it dependent on actually proving that you have to become available, like successful with not having money, which I completely ignores in analysis. But secondly, as a Spurs fan, I think I can claim that no, overcoming very bad season doesn't really strengthen the identity, because of the comparative. I'm still going to be there and suffer and be very, sad that my team is not doing well, but probably am going to feel much easier on the comparative when I still have to go out, have to pay for tickets more, and generally just feel like my team is doing terrible, right? So firstly, let's deal with everything that we get from Olja, and this way in the most important comparative in this debate, which is going to be why necessarily we link mentally success to feeling actually good as fans, where that is the most important interest in this debate. The first thing we get from Olja is the mitigation to say that their alternative on the comparative is we can invest in young players, and therefore we can somehow be successful in the future, right? Not only does their entire analysis of overcoming strength identity is dependent on this, I just think it's completely ludicrous, right? At the point where you have a team that is literally struggling and being at the point of being relegated because they're not doing well, because their players are shit, this means that they're literally losing money every season. What does this necessarily mean, right? This probably means that you have to raise money for more expensive tickets. The reason this is problematic is, yes, you can comparative claim, obviously some fans are still going to be very loyal to the club, but this means that you're making like your average people that are probably middle class that still have to go to stands and pay your yearly tickets if they actually are good fans, like to make trade-off because it's something that they just enjoy, and their wife is going to look at them, oh god, it's just a sport, versus everything else that they have to do. So definitely also going to lose money on that, even though you're trying to have more expensive tickets. Secondly, very obvious, you're probably losing your best players at this point, right? That already fans are connected to, by the way. Why? Because you can't offer them the same deals and paychecks that other clubs can. This means that Leicester could offer you better paychecks as a player, like from Newcastle, because that very often also translates loyalty when you have a family to fill and build reputation in the next few years for the future, which means the players are probably going to leave to better clubs because their club is literally falling apart. But obviously Newcastle can't afford it, especially if they're facing relegation. And lastly, you're obviously struggling to buy new players as well that are probably going to be more competitive against any other clubs, right? When there's a market in a competition, you're going to be the one that is going to be like bidded out when it comes to buying players. And obviously you cannot invest in your youth academies because these young players probably don't want to go to your academy because it's also probably because you're losing money. Shit. So you're probably not investing in your youth academy in some boy that could play with you for in the next 5 years, right? But they're probably going to choose another youth academy that probably is offering the better coaches, better investment, etc. Right? On the comparative, which I think is important to note here, that probably we would be better with money, specifically in this point, not obviously just being more successful for all the assets it brings to you, but also on the academies and homegrown players, right? Which also directly now engages with their identity point that was already taken down by me just saying all of this, right? But I think that if you're talking academies and homegrown players, right? At the point, like on our side, when you want to show that you're obviously not a plastic club, although you got just like a lot of bunch of money, you still want to have some sort of this local line that people can relate to, right? This means that you could be more able to provide these, you know, players in the academies or homegrown players better wages, coaches, and infrastructure, right? This is the case that we have in La Masia in Barcelona that is sponsored by Qatar Airways and didn't want to be like, oh yeah, we're just buying all our players from around the world. We also prove that we can grow like homegrown players ourselves, right? And fans are more likely going to love them because they can identify with them more, right? Young boys are going to find them like much more easier to relate to because they grew up a few streets away from you, right? You're probably very similarly tied like to religion or or the background, class, or whatever, right? These are going to be the people that young boys are going to look up to. Oh, I can go into this academy as well and be successful, but none of this obviously happens on their side. They're all losing money. So I think this also deals with that. But look, on this, the entire overcoming strength is the identity thing. Not only is this based on you actually rising, which they never prove, but secondly, obviously we concede. Fans were going to be local to the degree realistically because people generally love football and love certain clubs they've grown up with. But the comparative here is that enjoyment is going to be much, much worse on the comparative, right? Before engaging with that, just 2 quick responses to all as well. The first thing that they say is players wouldn't be able to share political stances, but players, never literally do that anyway, because players are not allowed to do it because of public perception, and the player of the Celtic would never wear an IRA badge, but fans are obviously going to say boys of the old brigade, right? They never share these stances anyway because they don't want to lose publicity, and they always give the most vague responses ever. It's like football players, we all know it, right? This means you always have the incentive to also stay politically neutral, because if you weren't and you were saying some like questionable shit, you would probably get sanctioned by the FA. So I think that point is a wash. The last point is a wash, and we say you're going to lose leverage because these investors are going to be selfish. But you as fans, like if your club is doing better, I'm not sure why would you care. But secondly, more importantly here, if you're an investor looking at this as an investment fund, you obviously want to pander to the fans and do fan service, like better merch or events, to buy the best players that they can now stand behind and prove that we are literally building a new identity around this club, right? Because they want to buy good players and please the fans because they want the return on their investment. There's no reason for them to be selfish and use these people. We can see Man City doing everything that they can to keep all of their fans and make all of their players have all the best promotion stuff and always talk to their fans and find new ways to communicate. I think OO is out. What is the most important thing therefore here? And how you connect, obviously, emotionally with new players as well. I think we can obviously have that on our side, right? Even when you see that the people are succeeding, you're very often, it's what Tim tells you, to that degree, because you feel so good that someone is doing good for you and being loyal to your club, that you can very often go through your own biases and racial discrimination through cognitive dissonance, right? Salah, who came from Egypt, and now when you have the song, if he scores another, you'll be a Muslim too, right? I think this is just a point that proves that. But lastly, why is the crucial connection between winning and feeling proud as a fan? You can still stay and support, but how we enjoy football is very realistic. We turn up to a game or go to a pub, and after a while, when you're shit, you just lose that excitement, not in your stomach, that actually wants you go to watch again or pay money to watch a club again or wear someone's shirt, right? I think that when you go to watch a match with the mindset, let's hope we don't score an autogol or the Spurs chant, let's pretend we scored a goal, or you just feel shitty, right? And you're also jealous of your mates. You're probably going to get drunk because you're the one that's bad. You really don't find that enjoyment anymore, right? I think it has to be proven to you that not only can you get good, better players, new players that people can relate to, but also homegrown, your own players, that you're going to feel satisfied as a fan. You're going to feel that sense of pride, the same thing that your father said when you were going to that stadium, and you're going to I actually think we can win it. I actually think we can beat their ass. But the best feeling is when you actually do, and not when you think that you do, and you end up losing over and over again, which is definitely going to happen on their side, even if they want to prove to you that these people are going to stay, they're going to stay, they're going to feel miserable. Very proud to stand in offering government.
I thank Deputy Prime Minister and I'm happy to call upon Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here, here, woo.
Audio check, am I audible? Thanks. Please tell me if my internet dies. Okay. The reason why opening government need to lose in this debate is number one, because they didn't tell us why other sponsors aren't enough, right? Because they tell us that we can't have more money. But what my leader of opposition told you in the beginning of the speech is that there's incentive for other sponsors to obviously give money, although they're going to be different in extent. That is why it is not enough for OG to just say, we need more money, right? Because I think alternative does happen. The reason why we think sponsor has an incentive to give money anyways is because it's the biggest source of advertisement to put your logo, name on the logo of the shirt of the players. That is why I think there are massive incentive for other sponsors to put money in there. I don't know why it is that desperate to the extent that every player are going to leave. But secondly, I in terms of player suddenly leaving, right? I don't think this is also very likely the case. The first reason is because I think player obviously loves their own team in the first place, right? Because this player have obviously experienced the hardship of this team and still chooses to remain in this team for so long, right? But secondly, there's going to be a public backlash in the moment that in which this player are going to move to other teams just for the sake of money, right? For example, Kevin Durant, sorry to use the example of basketball, Kevin Durant is one of the really good player who support us, who played at Oklahoma Thunder, that however choose to go to the Golden State Warrior, which is which was the strongest team in NBA. What have happened is that many fans just started hating this player, right? And I think it is I think players will be deterred from doing that action, knowing that they're going to be a massive backlash. That is why I think these players will be deterred by suddenly leaving just because their lack of money in the first place. That is why I don't think the opening government can ever take this debate on that ground. But but still, I'm going to be generous and explain to you why fans don't really want this, even if it is at the expense of having less chance of winning. So first piece of question we need to answer is that what do the fans actually want? Because this is what opening government completely lacked in misresponse to what my leader of the opposition. So what the fans want right now, and who are the fans right now? We think the fans right now are the one who love this team, irregardless of the consequence right now. Because the info slide suggests that this team is not doing good for pretty long period. And you say the reason why you love this team is because you have this local bond to it, which means this team makes it feels that this don't really think that winning is the primary reason why they believe in or to love this group, but rather this image that this team is doing good to your own community. But the fact or the fact that this team is benevolent or the fact that you have particular association with a particular particular player is the reason why this fan believe in this team. So why all of these are going to be diluted on the side of affirmative, and why we say that this is not something fan wants. So the first thing that my partner told you is that this idea of this politicization, which the previous speaker rebutted by saying that you aren't allowed to do any political discussion, political assertion. Anyways, no, we're not really necessarily saying that every player wants to go against Saudi Arabia, which in fact I think they want to do it. But even that is not the case. The problem is that at the moment in which Saudi Arabia do something wrong, all of that wrongdoing and the bad images will be associated with this team, because this team won't be able to, for example, do a collateral strike or publicly criticize Saudi Arabia in the instance that all England, for example, sanction Saudi Arabia. Because notice, it is possible for United Kingdom, for example, to do a sanction or politically, criticize Saudi Arabia. But the thing is that, this only team, Newcastle, let's say, will not be able to do that as a collective. What does this cause? This, number one, makes it look like this Newcastle team have sold their spirit to Saudi Arabia to win in that competition. And I think this is particularly problematic because people hate establishment in the first place, right? Especially if OG are talking about lower class individual in the first place. I think what they hate the most is the establishment and the one who has the biggest amount of the money. And if you are going to sell your own benevolent image, the love to your own locality just to gain more money, just to have some superficial victory, I think that is the moment in which that fan will be pissed off and no longer want to support this. But secondly, genuinely because of the fact that Saudi Arabia is the country which continuously do human rights violation, but also denies women to like enjoy sports in general, I think sport as a one sports fan, like I will be disgusted about the fact that they need to sell their spirit just for that superficial win, even if that is the case. That is why, because all of the bad image associated with Saudi Arabia will be attached to this, that they genuinely don't want it. But the third reason why why fans don't want this is because of the criticism by the other team and the criticism of the by the league itself. The reason why this is important is because being isolated in this own particular league means that you may have some disadvantage, but also the fact that in Facebook, Twitter, wherever, that people are gonna say shit to your team just for this sponsorship, right? I think that in itself also, like, make the fan uncomfortable as a result of it. That's why the fan don't really want it. Finally, in terms of getting stronger, but before that, closing.
If your comparative is to claim that other people will still invest in it, who are these other people and why don't they have the same amount of baggage as Saudi Arabia or this investment?
Firstly, I think it can be whatever multinational corporation, and we would like to support it as long as this multinational corporation is associated with a bad image, like for example, like committing a human right violation, or let's say like not allowing women to like watch sports, etc. Right? I think that is very important because I think Saudi Arabia is special in that remark that they are committing a human right violation. But finally, briefly, on to the point of getting stronger. So the previous team said that what wants is to win, and it's exciting. They would just want to see winning. But this is very, very false. I won't say it's totally false, but not the primary priority of the fan in the first place. As I indicated in the beginning, this team have consecutively are experiencing a downtime for so long. I don't think it is the primary priority. Rather, what they want is to have the association with the team right now at the moment. Why all of these will be diluted, and why the team itself will not be able to remain as it is right now in the status quo. Firstly, because it is short-term, it has this short-term incentive, as my partner told you. One, that these people may buy new good players from other teams, which means they're going to make a new Newcastle team. And we think this is crucial because all the fans who love the team right now won't be able to associate it with that new team because like who are playing there is entirely different. The reason why we think this is likely is because Saudi Arabia Fund has huge amount of the money and have an incentive to grow this team in a short term, which means they have incentive to kick out the good players they have in the status quo or the iconic players that they have in the status quo. And we think this is also going to piss off the fan at the end of the day. At the end of the day, what we have proven to you is that one, fans don't necessarily want victory as a first priority, but two, shaking hand with the villain and selling your spirit for superficial victory are going to face a massive backlash from other teams, but also it in and of itself means that you are a moral complicity for the wrongdoing. For all that reason, I don't think fan wants this.
We thank the DLO. We're happy to call on member of government here.
Hello, am I audible? All right, awesome. I'm just gonna fix my papers. Sorry, I'm fixing stuff. All right, I'm good. I'm gonna start in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to do 3 things. Number 1, I'm going to rebut opening opposition. Second, I'll deal with closing opposition. And then I'll explain why it is important to reclaim the glory days and where this funding will go otherwise. Number 1 is politicization. So firstly, I think it's already being done by many other clubs. Man City is Saudi Arabia owned. There are many clubs with very sketchy sources of funding. So to the degree that they probably can't criticize each other at all points in time, I'm not quite sure how big a harm this is. But secondly, the average fan probably cares a lot more about sports, about winning, and the capacity for the team to succeed, rather than the political backgrounds of it, especially because of the very complex, very like you need to read a lot of like articles, foreign affairs stuff to be able to understand why Saudi Arabia is so bad. So I don't think this is the most important conclusion. Secondly, I think they just kind of assert the alternative sources of funding without really proving why anyone would be willing to invest in a middling, struggling kind of team, and therefore I don't think they can claim that as their comparative. I actually think it's a miracle that we can get the Saudi Arabia sovereign fund. I'd say that's a good thing. Secondly, on control and what I think will be the closing opposition extension. Firstly, I would say that struggling, cash-strapped teams have far less control and autonomy over the capacity to make decisions. The reason for that is poor clubs actually have to pay more for management, for players to be able to join their club than a rich club would be able to, simply because you have to convince these individuals to have to play for a terrible team, because they have to spend a significant amount of their career there, because they have to like maybe lose some investment in the glory of being able to play instead for City, instead for Liverpool, etc. So I don't think it's very likely you get much control when you're always on the back end of negotiation if you have very little funding that I think then gives you a lot of this control back. But secondly, I would say that it's unlikely that these teams will be super inauthentic, not willing to consult with local communities, for the same reason that I think if it seems inauthentic, if it seems plastic, it's far more likely they engage in consultative, far more likely they want to ensure they have fan opt-in and buy-in, rather than, which I think like the quote-unquote mandate that a lot of these local like poor investors might want to be able to have are likely to be able to offer. So the first thing I want to claim then in extension is ask, where does this money go? I don't think investors are likely to just stop and like, you know, be sad that Newcastle doesn't want to be able to take their investment. I think it's likely a lot of competitors with respect to people who are near you in relegation, a lot of competitors with respect to the limited number of slots you have in being able to qualify for the Champions League are likely to be able to take on this investment instead and rise to the top. And I think what that means is not only does that increase the chances of your club struggling and middling for years, potentially losing a slot in the like upper tiers of the Premier League, but moreover, why is this an important policy to be able to enact? Firstly, I'd say it's a reclamation of the glory days. Not only is it because you have more money and more success, as OG might say, but it is because the current years of struggle where people have called for management to be fired, where people have asked for new coaches and managers, that I think have severely diminished fan interest because it shows that the organization is unlikely to make the necessary changes to be able to succeed, is now changed. And this piques the interests of fans because they can, for once at the very least, see the light at the end of the tunnel, know that there's a possibility for better change to be able to occur, and therefore is good for fans overall. Take note, I don't care if this is not super long term, and this is often the struggle of a lot of like losing teams. One, I'd say it probably is super long term, precisely because you sign players to long-term contracts, precisely because it's likely gets you more investment moving on to the future. But even then, the 2015 season of Leicester, even if it was like a one-season miracle season that got it, it was a massive amount of fan interest where everybody tuned into every Leicester City game to see their one team break and make a miracle and explode. I would still say that it's fantastic for fans, even if it means that they, just because it avoids a lot of the years of struggling they're likely going to have. Secondly, I'd say it challenges the norms of the Premier League and ensures that you have a larger pool of fans and greater fan interest. For the reasons that, and it's not even just the Premier League, right? Almost all football leagues have general like a what do you call this? Like a solid top 3, top 6, top 2 that I think is always interesting when one team attempts to be able to break them. Which is why Leicester City's story was very interesting, because for once it was not a big 6 team. And I'd say if it was in Germany, if it's not Bayern or Dortmund, that's interesting. If it's in Spain and it's not Madrid or Barcelona, that's interesting. And I would say for once, this likely ensures that fans have a greater amount of interest because it means that they can for once compete with a lot of the top teams in the league and therefore at the very least increase the general amount of happiness that they have, especially this Newcastle. I'd say it's a wonderful time. Manchester United's relying way too much on Samuel Blackwood. I don't think Arsenal's going to be good anytime soon. I think the capacity for you to do this now especially is a very good chance for you to get back to the top. Thirdly, I'd say it's good for the fans, right? It is the capacity to globalize the support base in general because of the changing nature of how we support clubs. Because now it's moving towards things like Facebook, online forums, Reddit, etc. And if it is precisely the fact that you have now foreign investment, that you can attract a lot of players from everywhere, which is what Leicester City did with the increased investment and got players from all over the world, it allows you to globalize your fan base. And that's one of the biggest benefits you can get from sports as an average fan. It is the capacity for you to relate with other people, especially when you are winning. It's a capacity for people to move beyond their communities and feel like there's a strong sense of brotherhood. There's a strong sense of kinship. whenever their city or their club wins. And I think that's a very, very important benefit beyond just the individual meaning that you attribute to be able to be fans, but even more so in your local community. It's very important to feel like you're winning so that you can go to the bars and feel very happy rather than shut the TV off whenever your team plays Liverpool. I would say then that that's a fantastic benefit, especially because the nature of the sport is that it is shared and communitarian, precisely why we name communities around it Toshiya.
So in closing opposition, we are more than willing to agree with the government. You will probably get more victories. You'll probably have more money. The clash of the debate is for you to tell us why that is so significant to the point where it outweighs the harm of a potential erasure of identity due to MBS's incentives. How do you respond with that?
So number one, it's unclear to me why it's likely to erase identity for the same reason that you're not going to get the same degree of support, especially from the local community, to the extent that you're not willing to consult with them, that you probably have an incentive to be able to engage with them, or else you probably lose a lot of the local buy-in from the most loyal fan base you're likely to be able to have. But secondly, I would say that a lot of these fans care beyond these borders. They probably care a lot more about the fact that a lot of people are wearing your jersey, that they represent your name. So it's unclear to me what unique football identity that you have, but especially when it comes to winning. That's the only reason that fans are willing to go and watch games together, because they know there's a possibility of success. That's the only reason people still have the flag of Newcastle or whatever team in their room, because they know that they're winning and willing to go back to the days of glory. In fact, I'd say the glory days are much more core and crucial to the identity of this team, rather than the years of struggle which fans probably do not like to watch. And I would say then, it is precisely this identity built around middling, built around mediocrity and struggling, that you want to be able to ensure no longer exists, that I think they stick to in closing opposition. I'm very, very proud to propose.
We thank the member of government. We're happy to call upon the member of opposition. Here, here. Woo!
Am I audible? All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The way closing opposition is going to enter this debate is quite simple. We want to break the deadlock that is currently occurring, which is that no team is weighing why money or an identity or the retention of its purity is a very valuable thing. In closing opposition, here's what I'm going to posit. I am going to prove that the club is going to change to such an extent that it fundamentally is no longer what it used to be under the previous regime. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prove why retaining that version of identity is the most important things for fans in comparison to winning. So most of my extension directly responds to most of the content of CG and OG. I'll flag it out for you as we go. So the first, let me start with it. Why is the club going to change fundamentally to the point where it's no longer recognizable? The first question that I have to ask is, what is the incentive of PIC Saudi? Because this is a very specific actor with very specific interests. The first is that because it's controlled directly by MBS, it is oftentimes used as a tool for enhancing his imagery. Now, what does this mean? To make MBS look better within the sporting arena, which he is very new in, they want to revere him or brand him as a particular savior of a team. The reason for this is because MBS is oftentimes operated on a very egotistical standing in the way he elevates power. The only way he elevates himself through the kingdom and through all of the royal family is to prove he is someone that has done things that no other Saudi has done before. That's why he is the person that launched like Saudi 2030, this randomly that changes like Saudi Arabia, for lack of a better word, into Wakanda, right? He's just that kind of person. He wants to be the very best. Now, how does this link with the past history of the club? The first, MBS has the incentive to bury every incident and past achievement and every replicable player within this area. Now, why is this incentive particularly true? The first is because it is potentially, it's a potential that he cannot live up to the past achievements as well. And MBS, given the current political standing, literally cannot afford a hit to his name of that extent and nature. He will hide history because he fears that he may not be able to live up or surpass it. But the second thing, MBS also has the incentive to create new cults of personalities that are very divergent and different from what has previously been established in the club. So for instance, these are homegrown players that he has groomed and brought into the team that will become the stories of how MBS invested in Saudi youth and brought them out into the world. That is why, firstly, on a fundamental level, given the actor that is investing in this debate, their incentive is to enhance MBS's image. It is to project him as a savior of a club. That's why they will first fundamentally fundamentally change the history and background of the club. This is very different from what opening opposition said, because OO just said they will use them as a propaganda tool, but that doesn't explain the harm of why it fundamentally changes things for the club. CO uniquely owns this. Now, the second thing, oh yeah, I had a second reason why it's going to change. The second thing is PIC International actively has the incentive to make the most money possible for Saudi Arabia as an investment company because they have to answer to local authorities. Now, how are they going to do this? They are going to market the club to match an international audience. This is very bad for a couple of reasons. The reason this is bad is because oftentimes the fans are the reasons why the club is not doing very well. They are the people that don't really pay for tickets. They're just there out of loyalty and etc. And also they're just such a small number because, for instance, like I'm assuming Newcastle and like this Liverpool, Manchester are all real places, right? And they represent these areas in the clubs. They are oftentimes like, what was I saying? It's very good. Okay, I got it. Basically, they have to shift away from those local contexts and local cultures because that's just not sellable to an international audience. Liverpool culture, like, sorry if anyone here, it's like seagulls and really horrible smelling areas, right? That's why they can't sell that to an international audience. They want to make it as palatable as possible so that every individual can buy into this particular identity of this club. This is why fundamentally the club is going to change to the extent that it incurs the damage of people no longer having an area to hang on to or something to cling their hopes and aspirations to begin with. Now, let me deal a little bit with opening government because I think the PM says quite a few things that were not responded to OO, and I need to beat this in order for my argument to work. The PM suggests fans and loyalty and that same feeling is going to stay for three reasons. First, the fans deserve this investment. Secondly, is the fact that they have a communal feeling surrounding the club. The third is that happiness can come from a place where you don't necessarily have to have the identity to be happy. Let me respond to each individual one of this. First, I think it is true that people can be happy with the victories, but let's just look at the frame and what kind of fans we're talking about. This is a club, from my reading of the info slide, that has been in a downward trend for quite some time. Right? Now, what does this mean? It means that a lot of the fans that prioritize victories, prioritize scores, or prioritize not being relegated have probably left to other more successful options at this particular point. The reason why this is true is because, number one, it's just less emotionally taxing. Nobody likes to see the ship you love go to hell. Better you find another one to root for. The second is just that it's a frustrating experience for people that want to prioritize winning. So given that particular context, the people that want to retain and stay in these areas are the people that are indeed fans and people that are hyper fans of this particular area. So it doesn't matter whether they think they deserve the investment or not. It's about the type of people you're talking about. And these people are there specifically just for identity. That is the main audience your club is now catering to as one that has gone into decline quite rapidly. That's why the first two prongs of OG don't quite apply to CO, because they don't respond to the specific nuance of who is still a fan at this current time. It's not the people who want victories. It's not the people that find relish in having a pint with your friend at the bar. It's the people that see significant cultural acceptance and linkage with this particular club. That's why OG gets out of this. Now, the last thing I have to respond to from OG is that happiness can come from a place of cognitive dissonance. I agree this can happen, but I think to the extent that people are not able to have happiness in this club is something that is the most important. And the reason for this is now the comparative. So, like, I don't know why government frames this debate as if the club is on the verge of bankruptcy and that it's entirely falling apart. Like, not playing at the top doesn't suggest the extreme. I think we can assume there's some level of funds, there's some level of buy-in too. But the next thing I want to say is that the comparative and the alternative in our world is a potential more people-controlled version of this club. Now, what does this mean? It means fans getting together and actively trying to buy shares or initiating a takeover of the club itself. Is it going to succeed? Probably not, but that still gives individuals the linkage and heritage that they need with this particular club. But the last thing is that even if we have less funding, players are falling out, which doesn't seem likely given the analysis that I gave you earlier, it's still fine. The only thing left remaining for most of these people is the only cultural and like heritage that they have attached with this particular club. Given the incentive of MBS that is likely to be taken away from them, given this is an actor debate that prioritizes the interests of fans, that's why there is, on a comparison, money and winning is not as important compared to actually having the club under your control. For those reasons, proud to oppose.
We thank the member of opposition to conclude the debate for side government. We're happy to call upon the government whip. Hear, hear, woo.
Hello? Am I audible? Okay, just give me a second. So I think given the concession from CO, the only thing CG has to do to win this debate is prove why victory is more important than everything else. And notably, this is also the burden that a lot of times opening government failed to prove, and that's why to a degree if we're able to prove it, we take the debate over everyone else. Okay, firstly, is winning the most important thing in the debate? I want to deal with the other things or that opening opposition and closing opposition provided that they say are traded off to victory. The first is that the bad image of Saudi Arabia and the problem of politicization which OO ran. Why do we think this is problematic? Note first that their comparative explicitly from Deputy Leader of Opposition is that they want another multinational corporation, they want another rich entity to be buying out and not just Saudi Arabia. This is important because at no point do they explain why this multinational and corporation will not have the same potentially human rights violations in their own company, or have the human rights violations of if you're a Russian oligarch, for example, and not have the same potential problems that exist under their side. But I will suggest uniquely why Saudi Arabia is better as an image for a country that is Western, like Western professional league. There are a couple of reasons for this. The first is that most fans don't really care about what's happening in Saudi Arabia for the reason that most people don't know about what's happening in Saudi Arabia. Not all debaters are even well informed. What more individuals don't take it upon themselves to get access to information? The structural reason behind this is if you look at a lot of the media institutions in the US, a lot of them care about their own local news because it's what sells more to people who are more parochial in nature. It's unclear why the caring about what's happening in Yemen, what's happening in Saudi Arabian human rights is actually particularly important for them. But secondly, I would suggest that Saudi Arabia actually has a good image in a lot of these Western countries for the reason that they've historically been an ally of the West, and they're a key partner in the Middle East. It is unclear why these individuals are likely not to care about them, or why they're likely to hate on them, given that Saudi Arabia has been portrayed by the media, both by the right, like Democrats and Republicans, both by the conservative and liberal party, as a particularly good ally in the very first place. But thirdly, and most importantly, even if we believe that these are the actors who are very well known about the news and know about like Saudi Arabia, they probably will also know that MBS has a relatively good image in the West because he's seen to be the person who's modernizing Saudi Arabia. Modernizing Saudi Arabia from the time when they were historically misogynistic towards women, modernizing with the time when they're heavily reliant on only oil and not developing their economy, to a degree that the Sovereign Wealth Fund is heavily linked to MBS. It's actually a good thing for the image of the club. Know that, for example, the fact that the Gulf is trying to veer away from oil, veer away from the traditional old structure of Saudi Arabia, is exactly why people are likely to care about it even more. But lastly, if the comparative in this debate is that they'll have a rich ally also under their side, it is unclear why this rich ally will have not the same historical baggage, but the more mutually exclusive difference is that there's significantly more money here than any other bidder, and therefore if you're uncertain whether or not politically affect the outcome on either side, we are far certain that the amount of money you have for victory is greater, and that's what breaks the deadlock. The next thing they then say is their ability to control the team, and I think this is somewhat shared by closing. Here's twofold. The first is that it's non-comparative. If you have a rich multinational corporation, as a regular fan, you still won't have any control of what the company or what the team wants or what the team fights for, because there's no reason for you to have any voting power, any degree of leverage. To a degree that Saudi Arabia, or it's a Russian oligarch, or it's a British multinational corporation, it's unclear why there's a morally exclusive difference. But secondly, if you believe their initial model, which is local funding or small funding from local groups, this means they're likely to be straddled in debt. This means they're likely to be straddled economically, which Mikko points out is far more controlling, far more limiting for a club, and therefore something that you cannot credit under their side. That's why we get to change control. The last point is the composition of the team, and that's a problem. They say you're going to remove the stars we currently have, and that's why people will lose identity over the club. This is problematic because the stars are the best players, right? Most people associate or like the players who are the strongest in a team. So if you're a team trying to make a team from a mediocre team to a victory-winning team, you're not going to replace the best players. You're going to replace the worst players who most of the fans don't even know, or most of the people are not sure about. And therefore, it's unclear whether you're replacing the stars, meaning it's still possible you're old and at the same time create an identity of victory with respect to the composition of your team. But then closing opposition expounds on this and says, well, there are structural incentives from MBS to explain why they're likely not to become successful under their side of the house. Why do we think that this is not likely not to be true? The first is, it is unclear when they say that MBS will just bury the previous history of the club. At no point do they mechanize how this is likely to happen. It is likely that people who are fans remember the history of the club, remember the fact that they have a history of winning. So it's unclear whether MBS can just replace that history under their side of the house. But secondly, MBS has all the incentives to align with the previous identity of victory. To a degree, MBS wants to portray himself as an egotistical, great guy who's capable of succeeding and turning anything that he touches into gold. You being able to succeed as a club is essential. You being able to win as a club is essential in portraying that identity. And notably, the old identity of Newcastle at no point was characterized by closing opposition what it really was. We would suggest the old identity was the tradition of victory. It was a tradition of being successful in the past, and that's what fans right now are onto. So it's unclear whether or not changing or creating a narrative of victory will necessarily change the harm under their side of the house. Then they say the other incentive to harm the history is the profit incentive. This harms their case, because if you say there's a profit incentive, most companies would enter you only if you have victories, only if you have more people watching you, only if your league goes to multiple levels of the championships, because that's when you have more and more viewership. That's when your logo gets more and more mileage. To a degree that you're unlikely to be successful, it means that MBS has all the incentives, all the profit incentives to make sure you're successful under their side. And notably, it is incredibly risky as a business strategy, assuming you're profit-oriented, to shit on your old viewer base or your old fan base. Because the point at which you do that, you're taking a risk of getting a newer fan base, which you're uncertain whether you'll get. But at the same time, you're certain that you'll lose your current fan base. So there's all the profit incentives for you to make sure that your current fan base stays intact. Because at the very least, you have some degree of certainty where the revenue streams come from. But lastly, to a degree, expands to a global audience, it is unclear why global fans who don't belong to Newcastle are not equally important stakeholders in this debate that they ought to care about under their side. Then they say winning is not the most important thing because you have a history of not doing good in the past. We have to qualify what InfoSide says. It's not that Newcastle sucks balls. Sorry. Newcastle's incredibly problematic or incredibly low. It is said that they cannot compete at high levels of competition. This means that there's still some degree of success. What Mikko points out is, if the funding gets pulled out from here and goes transferred somewhere else, that success is likely to decrease. But secondly, if you have likely some degree of success, people likely care about the chance for winning and notably care about the potential for you to be able to win under their side, which you're able to get under our side. But lastly, if you have a history of losing, it's all the more the euphoria of winning right now that is significantly important in winning. But lastly, all the other considerations that Negative provided were uncertain whether or not fans care about them. But all fans in general care about winning. All of them still, to varying degrees, care about the euphoria of being able to become successful. And that's some value that is able to target and transcend everyone in comparison to the limits, quotes, and scope we got coming from the Negative bench. For all these reasons, we're very proud to propose. Thank you.
We thank the government whip and conclude side opposition. Indeed, the entire debate as a whole. We're happy to call upon the opposition whip. Hear, hear. Woo.
It's coming to my laptop. Am I audible? Sorry, I lost my phone, so I'm using Naveen's time. There are two reasons why closing opposition will take this debate. The first, because I think both sides of the house quite fundamentally assert, well, other than closing opposition, quite fundamentally assert that success is better than identity or identity is better than success. And note that most of their arguments is to prove those outcomes as opposed to prove why one outcome is more important than the other. The second reason why I think closing opposition takes this debate is because we are the first team to analyze the incentives of MBS, of the Saudi Investment Fund, and crucially tell you not just why there may be some changes, but these changes are likely to be so fundamental in nature that individuals can no longer identify with the club. Couple of things I'll do in my speech. The first, very quickly tell you who these fans are. I'll take 30 seconds. Then I'll talk to you about success, then identity, and then I'll tell you why identity is more important than success, even if we lose like all the stuff
Gov talked about earlier. Firstly, who are these fans? So Gov Whip tries to do the sneaky thing and say all fans care about success, not all fans care about identity. I think it's a spectrum, right? So depending on how close you are to the club, some fans care more about identity, some fans care more about success, some fans care a bit more about identity, some fans care more about success. But the unique nuance here is how do we know which fans are most important? I think it is the fans that care about identity, because these are often local individuals that are most affected by the club and that are most connected to the club. So the motion is very vague in who fans are, but I think these are the fans whose interests we have to prioritize because they are the most affected. The point I'm trying to make is maybe like 1,000 Manchester United fans in Malaysia, in Indonesia will be very sad if Manchester United lose. But the 5 fans that can relate to like Marcus Rashford being a local Manchester United boy, their net happiness is likely to be higher because these are the people who actually pin their hopes and aspirations on these clubs, as opposed to like other fans, like not necessarily plastics, but who don't necessarily has as high a connection to the club, don't have those boyhood or girlhood experiences when they are growing up and all these kinds of things. Secondly, with regards to success. So the first thing I'm going to do is mitigate a little about success, right? Why is success not that low in our? The first claim GovBench makes is that you have to pay more to attract people. That's part of the Gov extension. One, I don't think this is necessarily true because for all the reasons that both Gov and Closing Gov give about like your history, about your super loyal fan base, I think you're likely to have some sustainable funding and you're likely to have some like players who really just want to play for a club with a lot of history. That's why I think Shaqiri, instead of going to like RB Leipzig, preferred to go to Stoke for a while because he thought Stoke had more history. So I think there is some capacity to attract players. But secondly, if in a world where you can't attract individuals, I think people change their business model. So you're more likely to restructure to focus on local grown players. You're more likely to develop your academy. That may take more time, but it still means you're likely to restructure and there's likely to be some ability to still get good players. What's the comparative? Because the point of their extension to prove this was that we lose control when we are on the back foot in negotiation. It may be true that sometimes we lose control in particular instances when we're desperate, but the difference is we can pick and choose what instances and when we're willing to give up these things. In your world, it is a prerequisite of MBS's success to completely change the club and to actively take control away from you. It's a fundamental incentive that MBS has. The difference is sometimes that happens to us. So I think the comparative is far worse in their work. Secondly, CG says that competitors are more likely to defeat you. One, because the investment is likely to go to another club. One, I think if the outcome of this debate suggests that people should reject this funding, then perhaps no one else will accept that funding as well. But more importantly, MBS is only going to invest in one club because it doesn't make sense to invest in direct competition in the same league. That is to say, the only other person that gets it is one other club. So yes, maybe one other spot is gone, but I think it's a very mitigatable benefit. What does all these things prove? Yes, there is a difference in success, but it's immensely marginal in their world, and they cannot claim like the club is bankrupt and all this nonsense that they don't necessarily justify. Second clash with regards to identity. Why is the change to identity so fundamental? Number of reasons Naveen gives you. One, you appeal to an international audience and you take away and you're forced to take away the specific geographical ties that the club has. The Gov Whip response is that it is risky to do this. But isn't it even more risky to stick with a currently failing business model? I don't necessarily understand why appealing to international fan base is more risky than like sticking with a failing model that currently already isn't giving you enough money. Because if you didn't have to change anything, then you wouldn't feel the need to invest and intervene to begin with. But secondly, I would argue international audience is a new market that is easier to capture. So presumably in England, probably you already have preset ties with clubs in your local areas. It's more likely to be able to attract a new fan in Indonesia or Malaysia that doesn't have the same ties. You're more likely to win them over to your club. They're more likely to be an untapped market that don't have these things. So I think appealing to international audience is more profitable. Secondly, Naveen tells you that you force in new cults of personality and you bring in new Saudi Arabian players, coaches, and so on to boost your personality. But thirdly, and more importantly, you take away history, or you lower the focus on history so that success, if it happens, is no longer connotated to Newcastle, but rather connotated to Saudi Arabia. The government whip response is that we want to align with history because it helps. But it doesn't respond, right? Because the point of the response is, even if aligning with history allows you to reach more fans, it doesn't matter because MBS's incentive is for the success to be connotated to him. So even if we lose a bit of money if we don't align, even if that's true, that is likely to be a lesser important incentive because the main thrust of MBS's incentive is to ensure that success is connotated to him. I don't necessarily think money is as important to this individual for all the reasons that Naveen gives you. But why is this change so fundamental? You're likely to move stadium. You're likely to change name. The same way RB Leipzig did. So don't let them get away with saying that, oh, nothing is going to happen. You're likely to fundamentally change things so you can connotate it to the new Mohammed bin Salman era of Newcastle. But why is closing opposition over opening opposition? Because opening up tries to prove this as well. Because in opening opposition's world, you can still use the current Newcastle name and culture as a propaganda machine. But CO's unique analysis proves to you that a necessary prerequisite of the propaganda being effective is first destroying all the cultures and points of contact that fans had to their club before this. But even if success and even if they get more success and identity, why is identity better? One, I think you can mitigate it. You can dramatize failure, right? The same way how Philadelphia 76ers said, trust the process. I think we can still dramatize failure in our world. We can say we can make fans feel as if they should be part of it. But secondly, a necessary prerequisite for success is feeling like you're part of the club. I feel happy because I'm Newcastle, the club of locals, and Alan Shearer. If you no longer identify with your club or identify less, the success, you cannot connotate it to yourself. The nuance from CO is that you take away the locality of the club, the unique local geographical ties, because there's no point marketing that, the local players that aren't as good but are very important to the fans. This is important because the reason why people are happy is because they can connotate these achievements to themselves. They can escape and pin their hopes and aspirations from their horrible day-to-day jobs on this club. That's why when Liverpool wins, fans didn't do anything, but we'll say we won. The nuance is people need to feel like they own the club and they are part of the club. And their ability to do that is by relating to local culture, relating to local players, and feeling like they're part of the club. A necessary prerequisite to success is feeling like part of the club. If not, none of your success matters. Never be prouder to win. Thank you.
We thank the opposition whip and indeed all of the speakers in this debate. Please leave the breakout room back to the main room panel. Please take 2 minutes to review your notes and we'll get to discussing.
Thank you.